Oh, hello, come in. Come in. I'm just sorting things out. I'm sort of hemmed in by musical instruments. Actually, I finally got the harp out of from under the table the other day. I go to see if lockdown will let me learn a little bit more how to play it. But I'm also still working out where to put the larger books. This one, for instance, this would be a really good one to show you. There's a thing called the Folio Society, which makes very beautiful. It's a modern printing press, but it does very old-fashioned and beautiful editions of books. People belong to it and sort of get the books sent to them. But then they come. I couldn't afford to do that, but they come up on the second-hand market, and they're always in these beautiful boxes. And this was a series they did, the Folio Poets, where it's a folio-sized volume. Do you remember? That was the folio of Richard Hooker we saw the other day. So it's a really old-fashioned size, and it's very pleasant to read, particularly, on a winter's evening. It's all set out, you're not peering away at small print. And this, as you see, is the collected poems of Shelley, with a very fine introduction, actually, by Richard Holmes, who wrote the great biography of Shelley, Shelley, The Pursuit. And it has lovely, let's just bring it over here, actually. I got this nice bookrest out. It's got some lovely engravings in it. Look, there's one, just the deer and the lonely poet walking. I mean, Shelley is the sort of archetypal, wild, inspired, romantic, almost vagrant poet, fleeing from one place to the other, as it were, pursued by the muse. And look, that's his take on Prometheus, the classic myth of Prometheus, Prometheus Unbound. So there's some smaller and gentler engravings in here. There's Medusa. You can see just from those ones I randomly took that Shelley is one of those poets who has the power to speak in and through mythology. And of course the images on the front here, this is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. And the boat is both symbolic of Shelley often writes poems about being in boats and being driven before the wind. But of course that is in fact how he ended his life. He was in his sailing boat and he and his companion were overwhelmed in a storm, and they were drowned. And there's that famous scene when Byron and others came to find them and found their body on the shore. He was a great friend of Lord Byron's. But actually, I thought I'd read you almost my favourite Shelleyan poem, which is the Ode to the West Wind, because it seems to me to go right to the heart of who he is. So now I shall have to find it. I should have marked it for you. Here we are. It takes the form of 5 sonnets. It's quite an ode. This is the how it's set out here. You see the leaves driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing. And I love the way they've done the leaves here and then let them come over on the other side. And then it shows you, this is the west wind itself, and there's the figure of liberty, of course. It's very important for Shelley. But we've been having pretty strong west winds. My mother used to recite this to me when I was young. Not the whole thing, but quite a bit of it. Ode to the West Wind. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes. O thou, who chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seeds, where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion o'er the dreaming earth, and fill driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air, with living hues and odours plain and hill. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh hear. Thou, on whose stream mid the steep sky's commotion loose clouds, like earth's decaying leaves, are shed, shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean, angels of rain and lightning. There are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge, like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce Maenad, even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height, the locks of the approaching storm. Thou dirge of the dying year, to which this closing night will be the dome of a vast sepulchre, vaulted with all thy congregated might of vapours, from whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire and hail will burst. Oh, hear! Thou, who didst waken from his summer dream the blue Mediterranean, where he lay lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams, beside a pumice isle in Bias Bay, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers, so sweet the sense faints picturing them. Thou, for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms, while far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods which wear the sapless foliage of the ocean know thy voice, and suddenly grow grey with fear, and tremble and despoil themselves. Oh, hear! If I were a dead leaf thou mightest bear, if I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable. If even I were as in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then when to outstrip thy skyey speed scarce seemed a vision, I would ne'er have striven as thus with thee in prayer, in my sore need. O lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed one too like thee, tameless and swift and proud. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone, sweet though in sadness. Be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit. Be thou me, impetuous one. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth. And, by the incantation of this verse, scatter, as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. Be through my lips to unawakened earth the trumpet of a prophecy. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Well, an astonishing poem, a great invocation, a prayer, a wonderful desire to have the very spirit of the west wind within yourself. And I read it actually, although Shelley was an atheist, I can read this poem as a Christian prayer myself and want the powerful spirit of God in there. I love the idea that the words will be driven through the universe. The Beatles riffed on that, of course, in their song Across the Universe. And that these words of Shelley's are like sparks flying in the wind, ready to take light somewhere else. And they are, because since he wrote that not far before his death in Italy, his words have indeed been scattered as from an unextinguished hearth, his words among all mankind, and have wakened a similar sense of joy and power and energy in all of us who read him. Thanks for listening.